Yo, what up guys, ARTFX, and today I want to do something that has been requested. I was requested to do a tutorial about EQ modulation in Ableton Live. So I'm going to show you how you can take something like this and turn it into this. Let's get to it. So I started off this sound with a really simple patch. It's two saw waves detuned from each other. So how you do that in Operator, I basically have, right here you have the routing option. I took the last one, which basically means that all the oscillators are outputting sound and none of them are actually doing frequency modulation. So I've took two operators right here, two oscillators, whatever you want to call it. They're both set to a Sol D. And on the second one I brought the fine tune up to 25, which creates that detuned kind of sound. I could have brought up the spread as well to give it some more stereo width, but I haven't done that because I'm gonna add more stereo width later on in this sound. So I've also set, let's see here on the global tab, I've also set the pitch band to 12 semitones so we can actually do a full octave pitch band. And if I bring that up, you can see this is the pitch bend itself. So that's just what is going on right here. And I layered that with a other operator in an instrument rack, and this is just two sine waves. Again, the last routing option, and I've got two sine waves right here. One is a really low sub sine wave, and the other one is just an octave higher, just to give it some more upper harmonics, because there's a lot of pitch bending in this sound. So when the sub bass goes up or down, you might not really get sub frequencies anymore. So I just stacked two octaves of sub basically, and whenever you pitch it up and down, it will still have a reasonable, well, just have a little bit of sub. So now we can move on to the next effect. I'm gonna close down Operator and let's go to the next one. This is the amp. I've set it to the blue setting, and I turn on this dual switch right here in the output, which basically means that we're gonna get a stereo signal instead of a mono signal. What this is doing, it's just adding some higher frequencies. That's before, and that's after. So it's really crunching it, but also it's not really bringing up the mid frequencies that much. It just brings up the low end and the high end, which really gives it this nice sound. Next effect is a chorus. This is actually used to create more stereo width. So with the chorus, you can hear it kind of like sounds a little bit washed out right now, but that's just to give it some more character. We're gonna add a whole bunch of distortion and filtering, and that is really gonna bring out a lot of the qualities in this sound. So the next effect is a Saturator, and this is actually just giving it a lot of distortion. And because we're using that detuning on the operator patch, which you can't really hear that much when you play it back without the saturator, but now with this saturator, it's actually, well, bringing up that detuning sound as well. You can really clearly hear that sort of like oscillating waveform going on, which if you just listen closely, you can really hear that. For instance, here during that last part, you can definitely hear it. If I bring this up, for instance, to maybe 50, you can hear it really clearly as well. Now, what I might do is bring this down a bit, and then during this last part, I'm gonna bring it up slightly. I think that sounds pretty cool. So kind of like I have a little bit of a faster one going on as well, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. So next effect is the Overdrive. On the Saturator, on the Saturator the only thing I did is I brought up the drive just a whole bunch, and that's it. Then I have an Overdrive. Now this is just gonna add even more distortion. So what I did here is I brought up this little dot so that it basically covers the entire range of frequencies. I brought the drive up, to almost 70%. The dry wet is up to 100%, and the dynamics are down to 0%. Now that dynamics, the dynamic setting is actually really important. By default it's set to 50, and that makes it sound like this, which is fine, but when you bring it all the way down it sounds like this. So it becomes much more louder. It becomes much louder basically. It sounds really awesome. It gets a really gritty kind of sound. Next up is wow. And I think this is the first thing that's actually being automated. So I'm gonna open up WoW, and I'm also gonna open up my automation lanes. Now there's a whole lot of automation on this, as you can see. We're gonna have to look at this bottom one. So the bottom automation track right here is basically the one that's controlling this Vowel Filter. As you can see, I've set it to a comb filter. Dry wet is about 50%, and I turned on the Vowel Filter right here, clicked on the switch, and set the U and E vowels. And there's a tiny bit of distortion as well, and the automation is actually controlling this comb filter. So if we play this back, you should be able to see it. We've got the automation going on right here. You can already see it if I just select it. So it creates that sound. It really adds some interesting modulation on the sound, add interesting filtering. And then there's another wow filter. This time I'm using the band reject, and I brought the resonance up quite a bit. Same amount of distortion. Dry wet is also about 50%. And again, I'm using the vowel filter, but this time I'm using the A and the E vowels, so it's giving it a slightly different sound. And this time I'm using this particular automation lane, so it's slightly different, but it's kind of like doing the same movement, but in a slightly different way. So with that, it now sounds like this. Really hollows the sound as well, makes it sound a bit more hollow, which I think is great for neurofunk basses. Next up, let's see. Next up is some distortion, isotope trash. So in this one, I'm using the multiband mode, and let's see what I've done. We've got some tape saturation on the sub frequencies, and I brought the mix down a bit, so it's almost 50%. Then we have on the mids, we have the smooth overdrive, which is also brought down quite a lot. And then we have, on the high end, we have the mirror overdrive, which hasn't really been changed too much. Just the drive is down to 1.9, which I don't think even makes that much of a difference, but I think I've done that just because I was playing around with it. But yeah, that turns this sound into this. It's subtle, but there is definitely some more distortion in the sound going on right now. So next up is a whole bunch of automation on an EQ, and this is what this video is all about. First, you want to create something that has a lot of harmonics and has a lot of frequencies, and then you want to add, well, a lot of filtering with either filters or equalizers to kind of like sculpt out the parts that you don't want and the parts that you do want. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm using this EQ, and I think there's actually a bunch of automation lanes that are controlling this EQ. So first up, we've got this first one, which is a high pass filter, and it's being controlled by these two automation lanes. So the high pass moves up right here, then goes down, comes up a little bit, then goes up and down, and the resonance is kind of like doing the same thing. Right here it just bumps up the resonance, so it kind of like gives it an interesting sound. Let me see, maybe I can show you how that sounds with just a high pass. So it's nothing too crazy. Just does a small little bit of filtering. Then we have a notch filter. which is basically doing the same thing. It's this one, these two lanes. So these two lanes are basically recorded. I just pressed record and just fiddled around with this little dot right here, just moved it around, and that's what I came up with. That's something I do a lot, by the way, just record and just move things around with your mouse. You'll be amazed with how crazy sounds you can make. Then I also have a low pass filter on the end, which are these two lanes, I think. No, it's just this one. So it's just the low pass just moving down right here. Kind of like take off those higher frequencies for just a moment. It kind of like gives it a little bit more of an interesting sound. And we've got this little bump right here, so it's steady, then it goes down for a bit, then it comes up really quickly, goes down really quickly, and then it just slowly comes back up again. So that really makes it sound much more interesting. And then finally I have one big ass dip right here in the EQ. Let's see which automation lane it is. That's this automation lane, so that one is actually pretty crazy, as you can see. And you can hear right now, I mean, we're almost losing pretty much everything in the sound. I mean, there's still some sound going on, but we're losing a lot compared to before. So let's move on to the next effect, which is an overdrive, just to get some more distortion again. Makes the sound a lot more interesting, and we're kind of like bringing up the volume as well with this. Then again, I have another amp. This time, again, the blue setting. It's even a mono. I should do that in stereo. And it's really low in the mix right now. So then we have one final EQ, and again this is doing some modulation, I think. Yeah, so let's see, it's this particular automation lane. So we've got 3, 4, 5. Let's turn these two off. So first I've got a notch filter doing that, and then we've got a, well, almost a notch filter, but this one's actually a bell filter that's just brought down a lot. So that's this particular lane. Again, it's just moving slightly different than the notch filter, so but it's really carving out the frequencies that we don't want. And then the fifth one is actually a boost, and it's this particular one, and I'm using that to boost certain frequencies. Now, it might sound a little weird right now, we might get some clipping, but because we're distorting this afterwards, those parts where it's actually clipping will mean that there's just going to be a lot more volume pushing into the distortion, which will trigger the distortion a lot more heavier, which will give us maybe some really interesting distortion artifacts that might be really cool to use. So that's basically it for the entire layer. That together with the sub sounds pretty cool. Then we go into an audio effect rack, and I don't really think I should have done this with an audio effect rack. I could have done it without, I guess, but the only thing I'm doing here is I made 3 bands. I think I wanted to distort them, but I haven't done it. And on the sub band, the only thing I've done is I put a utility and brought the width down all the way, so it's pretty much a mono sub. There might be some sub frequencies coming through from this operator layer that has the detuned sols on them, which means that these are going to be stereo sub frequencies. So we have a mono sub going on underneath it, but because we have, well, basically this layer on top of it, we might get some stereo sub frequencies. So I've just put that utility on here and brought the width down all the way, just to make sure that the sub is mono. That's it for this entire audio effect rack. I haven't done anything to the mid and high band, so we can close that down. Next up is a trick that I use a lot, and that's this glue compressor. Now, to show you what it does, I'm gonna create an audio track in here. I'm gonna set the input to resampling, and I'll just record this particular sound for you. So you can see right here how it looks. If I bring this down a bit, you can see what happens. So there's quite a bunch of volume differences going on in the sound. We see that it's much louder right here at the start, then it goes down in volume, then comes back up. Then we have this pretty much solid volume level right here, but there are some peaks like here, and this massive peak right here. And then towards the end, it's actually becoming much louder. So I want to control that. I want to make sure that pretty much the entire thing, well, gets the same amount of volume throughout the sound. And I do that with this glue compressor. I brought the attack down all the way so that whenever something goes over the threshold, it'll basically respond immediately and start compressing. But I've brought the release up all the way to 1.2 seconds, which means that it's gonna take 1.2 seconds for it to go back up to the original volume, which it's not gonna do until the sound stops playing back. Because during the sound, it's basically, because the threshold is all the way down pretty much, it's constantly compressing the sound. But because we've used the settings like this, it's not really adding distortion, it's just leveling out the volumes. Now I'm gonna make another recording on a separate track. And this will show you how it sounds after the compression. So yeah, compression is turned on. Let's record. Now if we compare these two, you can see they're pretty similar, but during these sections where the volume was really low, it has actually brought up the volume, so it's more interesting. It's a more sustained kind of level. Now, on the other hand as well, I don't think we get any clipping right now. No, we're not getting any clipping, whereas with the original file, we got some clipping. It's nothing too much, but there's a slight difference between the two right now. The second one is just slightly louder, and I guess in this example it doesn't really matter too much because there weren't really that many volume spikes, but there are some bass sounds that really get a lot of that volume differences because of all the filtering. And it's a trick I use a lot, so definitely check it out. Next up, we've got an audio effect rack, and what I'm doing here is I've got a subband, I've got a mid-band and a high band, and the subband is completely clean of any effects. There's just a multiband dynamics which is used to create the bands. And as you can see, I mapped the low and basically the crossover frequencies between the bands. I mapped those to macro knobs, and I automated those, so I can check where are these automation lanes. It's probably these two. Yeah. So it's these two automation lanes that are controlling these two macros. Now, why am I doing that? I've got a isotope trash set to the smooth overdrive on the mid band, and on the high band I'm using a isotope trash with the mild excitement. And because these two distortions, I tried it out first using just isotope trash and set it to multiband mode, and then just automating the bands of isotope. But I got all kinds of weird clicks and pops, so that made me think, you know, the bands in trash aren't really made to automate. But I've done it basically a little different. I just created some bands myself and then put isotope trash on those bands, set to just the non-multiband mode, so just the regular mode. And then I just automated the bends on the multiband dynamics. So without and with. Now it's really squashing the sound, it's really making it sound pretty distorted. But that's the whole point of this. Then we've got another EQ this time I've got, I think it's a low pass that I've got right here. Yeah. So first I started with a notch, which are these two automation lanes. Just doing that. And then I've got a low pass filter, which are these two lanes. Just cutting off some of the higher frequencies every now and then. So then I've got this rack, which is a bandpass filter on, well, it's actually two chains. One is a bandpass filter. Just that. We're losing a lot of the sound right now, but then I have another layer with a chorus on it, and this EQ, which is again doing a bunch of automation. I'm not really gonna talk too much about it anymore. I've showed you guys a lot of this already. It's basically just a high pass and a notch filter. And those two together it kind of like gives us a parallel filtering kind of thing, because a filter and an EQ are basically just the same thing. I mean, a filter is an equalizer in some kind of a way, or you could also see it as all these individual dots on an equalizer are actually the same as filters. So that is basically going on right here. We have a parallel filtering chain. Then I have one more EQ8, which is just bringing down the frequencies around 160 Hertz. Right now that doesn't really make too much sense, but I actually added this after I did all the compression and stuff that comes after this step. It became a little bit too loud around this frequency, so I just took it down. So then we have some multiband compression using Maximus. Maximus is still one of my favorite multiband compressors, even though I use Ableton these days, but I still like to use it, so I've got this in Ableton. We have the low band, quite a lot of compression on the low end, and I'm using the stereo separation all the way to the right, which means it's completely mono. So I think I could actually remove that rack that I made, but I'm not even gonna bother. Then on the mid band, just a tiny bit of compression, and I brought the post gain knob down a little bit. And on the high band, again, I've got some compression. The master is compressed quite a lot, so this will really even out all the volume differences. It bring up all the frequencies and all the quiet parts in the sound, and that'll make it sound like this. Then I've got another EQ8, which is basically doing the same thing as I've done earlier. I'm just bringing down that particular range of frequencies. So you can hear they're quite loud. If I turn this one off, you can see the sub frequencies are pretty much just as loud as the frequencies that are going on right here, which is not something you want. So I turn on this one, and it just brings it down slightly. It's still a little bit crowded in the sub range, but I think this sounds pretty okay. Then I've got a final saturator, which is just adding a little bit of drive, adding a little bit of distortion to the sound. And then one final glue compressor, which is again doing the same thing. Attack all the way down, release to 1.2 seconds, threshold down quite a lot, and a makeup gain all the way. Makeup gain up all the way, I should say. And then turn soft clipping on. And what you want to do is, I usually start off, let's say, with the threshold all the way down. And you can see we're not touching the 0 dB level right now. And then just bring that up towards when you can see this little clip indicator start blinking. Like that. So that will just basically even out the entire level. So that's how you basically create this bass from that starting sound. So that's it. I hope you like this. I hope you learned something today. If you want to see more videos like this, comment, like, and subscribe. Help me to bring this channel up to 50,000 subscribers. That would be really awesome. Also, definitely check out the Discord server in the description. I'll hope to see you guys there. I want to get as many Neuro producers in there as possible. Now, if you don't make Neuro music, Neuro funk, Neuro hop, or anything like that, don't worry, you can still join. I mean, I just want to give you guys a nice platform to talk with each other and to connect with other like-minded people, because I know that a lot of you guys don't have any music producer friends in your real life, and that's why I make a chat like this, you know, where you can actually connect with other music producers. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you back soon. Peace!